Have you ever asked yourself, is investing really for me? How much do I invest? Where do I invest? Whose advice should I really listen to? In the Share.Market podcast series, we aim to answer these very questions and simplify the art of investing. And today, we have a guest who has made it her life's mission to help every Indian become a confident investor. She is known for turning complex investment jargons into simple, powerful insights and for breaking down the mental barriers towards financial freedom. She is none other than the CEO and MD of Edelweiss Mutual Fund and the author of the best-selling book, Mango Millionaire. In this episode, we will understand her investment journey, practical money habits, and real-life philosophies of money management. Please give a warm welcome to the incredible Radhika Gupta. Welcome, Radhika. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, we have a lot of Aam Aadmi questions for you, or in your parlance, the mango people questions.
Amjadsa question.
Yes. So, let me just dive right in. How do you overcome fear of investments? Because a lot of us don't invest out of fear. We don't trust ourselves, right? So, first of all, how did you overcome those hurdles, and how can a common man do that?
I think, and I won't use my example because finally I'm a finance professional and 99% of the world is not a finance professional, and I realize the things that are applicable to finance professionals are not applicable to normal people. I think the way you overcome the fear of investing is by learning how to do it. Most people who are scared of investing are scared for two reasons. One, because they don't know. They find the terminology very complex. They don't know how to choose. They get overwhelmed. Yeah. And I think it's one of the reasons I've written a book, is for people to just learn. So the second way you learn and overcome fear is by trying with small amounts of money. Because no matter how many books someone writes, no matter how many podcasts someone watches, until you try, fail, lose money, you'll not learn what your tolerance is, how you react to money. So I think the two ways you learn are, one, to learn, and two, to start. I mean, it's like learning to cycle, right? Or learning to steer.
Yeah. So if it's a first-time investor, he's just started his job, modest salary. So what are the three practical steps in addition to learning? How does he go about creating his investment portfolio to start with?
Okay. I break this down and maybe I'll make it four. There are four parts to this. One is savings. One is debt, one is insurance, and one is portfolio building. I think on savings, I have a simple practical tip. Have a post-tax savings target. So if you're earning 20,000 rupees a month, and if you're in your 20s, start with 10%. If you're older, I would start with a little more because you really need to get a little more. So I call it 10, 30, 50, depending on 20s, 30s, 40. Start with 10%. So post-tax savings target, and ideally, invest it via some automated instrument so that it doesn't hit your bank account. Again, I call it savings deducted at source. So that's one.
That's a very cool hack.
Yeah. So savings deducted at source, tax deducted at source, savings deducted at source. Second, make sure your debt is under control, because with young people, what distracts from the investment journey is the amount of credit card debt, all of that. So, control your debt. Make sure your insurance is under check. You have the life and health insurance you need beyond what your employer has. And then fourth, build a simple portfolio which should have three asset classes: equity, debt, gold, all of which are accessible through mutual funds.
So in life, we always grapple with these two ends of the spectrum, right? There's chai and champagne, for example. And similarly, there's savings and splurging. Yeah. How do you find that middle path, that balance, without feeling FOMO'd?
I mean, look, we live in times of YOLO, and that's why I think frameworks work. And I always tell young people who tell me, I'm earning too little, I can't save because I have to attend the next Arijit concert and buy that new thing at Zara and whatever. I'm like, yeah, but you guys pay tax, right? And they're like, yeah, but the to deducted hai. And that's why I made this whole point about STS, that if you take your post-tax savings target and put it away in an automated instrument, then this question doesn't arise. Look, I've also been a young person who studied on student loans, and I know when you start earning, you also want to live life, right? Yes. There's a time to go out and wear things and eat and all that stuff. So you want to do that, and money should be used to enjoy yourself, but there's a balance. And all I think you need to do is reverse the equation. It's usually income, tax, expenses, investing. Just put investing before the expenses in the equation. So income, tax, saving, investing, spending.
Nice. So, I mean, especially the younger generation, right? They're also inundated, like you rightly said. They all also want to splurge, and we are so there's so much of noise. There's noise about luxury. So
Yeah.
you have like your phones are on EMI, your cars
Yeah.
are on EMI, your
Those are
bikes are on like almost everything that they have. It's on EMI. And at the other end of the spectrum, you also have a lot of noise about how to invest, where to
Yeah.
invest. There are a lot of YouTubes. There are a lot of we get stock tips on Instagram now. You have YouTube saying 20-30% return milega in a month's time. How do you filter out that noise? If first time investor or any investor for that matter.
There are two things I'd say. One is you have to be thoughtful about who you consume financial content from. And the question to ask is, one, is the person you're consuming financial content from qualified to give you financial advice? Because very few people take heart surgery advice from an...
Yeah, I'd heard you had said medical advice is very similar to
yeah.
financial advice. Yes.
It's technical, right? Second is, these days, what scares me even more than qualifications is there are lots of people who write content online with perverse incentives to give you bad advice. I mean, everyone knows that if you write 2 saal mein paisa 4 guna, they will get clicks. And, you then just become a product. And that I don't think is very good. So I think you have to be very thoughtful about how much financial advice you consume and who you consume it from. By the way, even if you're consuming financial advice from people like me, and I'm not one of them, but one of the masters out there, too much of it is also going to confuse you, right? Because you're not perfect. You're not the late Chundranwala. You have your own circumstances, you have your own needs, you have your own personality. So I think learning the basics and putting down a simple framework, writing that framework, because that's your anchor, so that you're not seeing a new YouTube video every day and buying a new scheme. I think that's very important. So I think each individual should have some kind of personal investment policy that they write down. I certainly have one. The second is, I said be careful about who you consume financial advice from. I think be careful about who your role models are, what your role models are, because everyone feels they don't have enough money, and people felt that well before social media. So you don't need social media to make you feel like, oh, I went to a party and she wore this sari and she wore those diamonds and I want them. But I think be careful what your influences are.
Of course, in your book also you have in the start itself said, right, that wherever you go, you're asked, "Kaun sa mutual fund kharidna hai? Which stock should I invest in?" and all. My question is, what should ideally be the right question when we are looking at investments to make those informed choices?
Ideally, if you're looking to invest, you should know your goals and you should have some sense of your own persona. Are you a panicker? Are you okay if the market falls 20-30%? Then the right question is these are my goals. What is the right mutual fund for my goals? What is the right mutual fund is an ambiguous question. It's like, मेरे लिए दवाई कौन सी सही है भाई, तुम्हारी बीमारी क्या है, तुम्हारी बॉडी कैसी. So the right question to ask is, for this goal, I want to educate my son in London in 15 years. How do I build a portfolio? That is a good question using mutual funds.
So would you suggest that every goal should have we should have a portfolio for a specific goal?
It works nicely. Some people don't do it. I do think you should bucket your money into at least short, medium, long term. And short can be anything that's 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
Medium can be anything that's more 3 to 5 years. And long can be anything beyond that. Because a lot of people only have 1 or 2 goals and they're like, Baki ka kya karo? I'm like, call that long. So at least short, medium, long. I think specific goals are nice. Like I think kids' education is very nice to put as a goal. One, because then it becomes very, very, very long term, right? Especially if you have a small kid, like me. Second is you can also talk the kid through the goal and there's a sense of accomplishment. And then you will never redeem. When you know it's for your kids, London wali padhai na, it's very hard to redeem.
Okay. So you spoke about risk appetite and you spoke about goals. But there's always this panic which sets in because our markets are turbulent.
Yeah.
Suddenly there's a crash, suddenly the election announcement. There are a lot of things that keep happening, right? how do you resist from panicking, especially when you have long term? Short term is still, you can, like, probably play around, but the long term goals, how do you not panic?
I think you stop watching the news. After you really stop watching the news. And this is where I come back to that whole point around anchoring and writing things down, because you need something to ground you. It's like, when you have a turbulent ocean in Mumbai, they have those things, those big triangles. I keep forgetting what they're called, but they're placed all over Marine Drive. They're these Tikona things that kind of anchor the water. They are there. So you need things that anchor you. And I think goals are important to anchor, and goals are important to write down. The other thing I recommend for people is they don't review their portfolio as frequently as they do. The problem with, and apps are doing a great job, but the problem is we have access to so much data. अगर आप किसी चीज़ को रोज देखोगे ना, तो आपका कुछ temptation होगा कि कुछ जाके कर. I think most people should review their portfolio once a quarter.
Okay.
To see what's going on. I don't look at mine more than once a quarter, and they should actually take action once a year.
Okay. So building on that, what are the top 3 mistakes an average investor does?
Oh God, I mean, this is a long list, and I don't want to criticize average investors. Well, we've talked about FOMO, and just doing things because someone else has done them, rather than anchoring to yourself. I think there is a real case of recency, and again, because of the presence of so much data, anchoring to the last 1 year returns, which I think is the most useless statistic in the MF industry. And the third these days is actually just too many financial products. I mean, portfolios, with the advent of all the products out there, have become increasingly complicated, and people are very quickly moving away from Dadi Chawal. I mean, my father, supposed to be a very simple investor, gets a new financial product that he's almost sold every week, and then I have to tell him, no, you don't need that. Just like the chutneyization of portfolios.
Yeah, very true, right? When you spoke about your father, there's one aspect of our investment planning that either we try and put off, or we say, "Acha, theek hai, dekhte hain. We'll figure it out. Let's look at short term," like you rightly said, right? And that is retirement and retirement planning. You have a very different view to that, Radhika, and I think that's a very differentiated view, where you say retirement is not a full stop. Zindagi khatam nahi hoti hai. That's a time to enjoy. That's a time to freedom.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions around that, because I think that is a subject which is often ignored. So my first question is there such a thing as too late for retirement planning?
Yeah, there is. I mean, look, nothing is too late, but if you're planning your retirement in your 50s, getting a little late. So ideally, even in my 10-30-50 framework, when I say you need to save 50% in your 40s, it's partly because of retirement. It's partly because you have income, and it's also because you have time. See, the thing people don't realize about retirement is there was an old picture of retirement where someone retired at 60. They were very fragile. Zindagi ke kuch 10 saal the. Beta America chala gaya tha, and they would go and be dependent. That's not the retirement. Firstly, you spend 30 years of your life in retirement. If life expectancy is in India is 90, one third of your life is going in retirement. Secondly, hopefully most people are fit at 60. They're mentally fit, they're physically fit. I've seen it with my parents, I've seen it with my in-laws. And honestly, our generation of parents was amazing. They've been amazing. They've worked really hard. They made a lot of financial sacrifices. As I see my own, they really deserve to live it up in retirement, because they're done taking care of their children. So I think they need dignity in retirement. And more than dignity, they need freedom. So I don't think your children are your retirement.
Absolutely.
You never know where they are. In fact, these days, because the previous generation invested well, particularly, and had real estate, the children tend to be dependent because they can't sustain the same lifestyle that the parents provided. So these days, actually, we have the opposite problem. You might be taking care of your children in retirement. So it's a bit tricky. But I think you have 30 years of your life to live in retirement. So you can't be an FD investor waiting for my interest. Okay, you have to take some risk. The third thing that's going on is aspirational inflation is real. Everyone feels they don't have enough money, not because we don't have enough money. Per capita income has gone up in India, but our aspirations are different. You don't want to spend your medical conditions in a public hospital, which a previous generation would have been okay with.
Yes.
You want to travel a certain way. You want to live a certain way. So people do retirement calculations factoring inflation. They don't factor in aspirational inflation. Because we want to travel. Everybody wants to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So that's my take on retirement. I really think you should plan for it in your 40s. You can then build portfolios that are far more aggressive in terms of their equity exposure. And then as you get to 60, you can dial it down a little bit. Doesn't need to be 100% debt. It should not be 100% debt. And you can also plan it in a way that you get quarterly income.
Okay. That leads to my next question. So we have the cohort of retired senior citizens, right? A lot of them, because they have invested in real estate and all, or they would be government folks, pension and or rent is part of their passive income at that point, at that stage of life. So how should they look at investments? Is there a way that they can factor in risk and still have a goal and figure out how to do their portfolio at that time?
So I think it's net a cash flow statement, and I'm going to come to rent later. And you look at your inflows and you look at your outflows. Now for some people, pension income is an inflow. My father has pension. So that is nice. Some people have other sources of passive income. And then you look at your kind of outflows. And then you plan investments. I think you should also, as you're retiring, be careful about too much illiquidity in your portfolio. So you can't build portfolios you can build them that are long term, but you also need to make sure that they are liquid. I also assume when you've retired, your health insurance is taken care of well in advance, because that's the biggest thing that eats in good portfolios. So figure out your income, if it includes pension, great. Figure out your cash flows. Then do your investment planning. And if you're a pensioner, you might not need as many SWPs, etc., because your basic cash flow is taken care of. Rent is a tricky one. I think a lot of people of that generation invested a lot in physical assets and not as many financial assets. And while I don't like secondary homes and all as investments, they are horrible in your 60s and 70s. I'm just dealing with one case at home, because the problem is they are a nightmare to manage. Some physical property that you have in Bangalore, that's some flat, they'll have a tenant who is run away. Okay? You'll have some documentation that is not done. Uski rent will be 2% of the property value. If you manage to sell the property, you will get at least 8% or 7% in a bank and 9 to 10% in a mutual fund. So you become in retirement asset rich and cash poor when what you really need is cash income.
Okay.
So my worry about retirees, and I keep telling people, once you're 60, start getting more liquid. Sell the extra properties.
Okay. So keep your base home where you're staying as yours, and then rest you liquidate into financial assets.
Or give them to your kids and tell them to manage them. Because if you intend to give them to your kids, then give them to your kids. Half the times the kids don't want them either.
Yes, very true.
So if you have, so I know someone who has a primary home. He has 4 other homes. 2 he's given to each of his daughters who are living there. And the other 2 I've told him, sell. Because you will not be able to manage them when you're 75. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not easy. But also, unfortunately, what happens is the secondary homes or even the tertiary homes, there's always an emotional value attached to it. So it becomes extremely difficult, especially at those ages, to say that, ab liquidate kar lo.
And the problem is, a primary home, I always say, I've said this hundreds of times, a primary home is an emotional decision. Should be emotional here, living there. You can't do maths on everything here. A secondary home and secondary real estate is not an emotional decision. It has to be evaluated with the same lens that you evaluate a financial investment.
Understood. So, on the same retirement bit, now there's this huge movement of FIRE, right? Early retirement, where people want to retire by 40. They have plans to retire by 40 and enjoy the rest of 40 or 50 years that they have, right? How should somebody, if somebody is really aiming for that, then how should they go about it? What should they do?
Well, I struggle with FIRE a little bit. But I guess if you're aiming for FIRE, then you should start investing very, very early. Look, I think retiring at 40 is very, very early. And if that is a trade-off that you indeed want to make, then you have to spend a lot of your 20s and 30s doing very, very aggressive savings plan.
Yeah.
So instead of that 10% in your 20s that you say, you probably need to be saving 50-60%. And remember, income is not very high in your 20s and 30s. So The reason I think FIRE is tough is your peak income earning is actually in your 40s. Now, I think the definition of FIRE is a little broken because people say FIRE and assume I won't be going to office and I'm sitting in the Maldives drinking some pina colada.
Yes.
I don't think that's what FIRE should be. My definition of FIRE is dignity. It is that you're working because you enjoy working, not under the stress of going to work, not under torture from someone's boss, if bosses torture you. But you should be working for joy and dignity. That I think is far more to it. You have the ability, you have enough corpus in your bank at 40 so that you're not making choices under duress. That I think is what my definition of FIRE. It's not pina coladas in Maldives or luxury, wherever it is.
Okay, to wrap up, what's the one non-negotiable advice for the investor?
I mean, there's lots of non-negotiable advice for the investor, but I think simplicity and liquidity is really, really important advice. And I say this among all the things I could have said because I think financial products are increasingly getting more complex and there's just that much more choice out there. So going back to dal chawal and running very basic portfolios, I think has actually become a lot more important.
Okay. So now, just as a last bit, this is something I call as a tarka round.
Okay.
Okay, so this will be quick 60 seconds questions, rapid fire ones which I'll ask you. Okay. So your first question is, one money habit you absolutely swear by.
What money habit? I think planning as a couple is a very nice thing rather than individually.
Rather than individually. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one. The worst financial advice you have ever heard.
Invest everything in equities when you're young because you're young. I mean, two young people are not the same. It's called age related, risk appetite, age and risk appetite.
Okay. If you could invest in only one asset class for the next 10 years, which one would that be?
Equities.
A financial book other than Mango Millionaire, everyone should read once.
I mean, there are many, many good ones. I think in the Indian context, Monica's Let's Talk Money is good. I think Rich Dad, Poor Dad does a good job in terms of just building habits. I think Nudge is very good in terms of behavioral habits. So there are many out there.
Splurge without guilt on one thing. What is it for you?
Oh, for me, I mean, the house was a splurge. So that was one. I think jewelry has always been a bit of a splurge for me.
But I think with women, jewelry is something.
Jewelry, handlooms also,
Yes.
Handlooms is a big splurge.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, Radhika. Thank you so much for being with us on this show. It's genuinely a pleasure and honor to have you here.
Thank you.
And to our audience, it's clear that investing is less about complex formulas and more about simple habits. Stay tuned for more such interesting conversations on the Share Market podcast series, and we will meet you soon in the next episode.